Good morning. My name is Roger Upham. My pronouns are he, him, and I serve on your board of directors. Welcome to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. We are a community of youth, adults, and children of many diverse theologies, held together by covenant, not creed. We find value in being together and celebrating rituals and rites of passage together, as we will today. Together, we share the values of courage, reverence, and compassion. Welcome to any visitors. We are so glad you're here. May you find deep welcome and belonging here in this place. Please join us today after the service for a 12-minute intro and tour. Please find Gloria after the service by the fabric wall over here. To share a request for today's meditation, please place it in the chat box or add it to our meditation bowl before opening hymn. Please gain consent before you use someone's full name. The meditation bowl is in the Soulwork Center. We do offer spiritual growth opportunities for our children and youth during the 11 a.m. service, and we offer nursery care during both services. We ask that you register ahead of time. Please see Matt Thielen if you have any questions. As always, your children are also welcome to stay with you during the service. We welcome the joy, noises, movements, and mirth that little ones bring. Let's take a moment and wave to all those attending online. Good morning. Our services go 60 to 75 minutes long. If you need to leave before then, you are welcome to use the doors at the rear of the sanctuary. For those in the room, please join us at our social hour after the service in the social hall. Welcome to our church. Together we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
My name is Reverend Jessica, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am the lead minister of this congregation. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together we make it a holy place.
Steve Kahn, he, him. Today, with the veil between generations particularly thin, we remember and honor those who preceded us and see a bit more clearly how we benefited from their actions. In our families, we think of what we learned from parents and grandparents, how they helped and continue to help us. Same with our church ancestors. Not so long ago, these 4 acres were purchased, a mortgage assumed, an RE wing and a sanctuary built, a new HVAC system was installed, and the debt from the mortgage and the HVAC was successfully paid off. Some of the members involved in those acts of generosity are no longer with us, but some are sitting with us today. I light the chalice in honor of both our family and church ancestors, especially how they thought of us and what we might need even before we knew ourselves.
I'm Reverend Jack, your associate minister, and my pronouns are he, him. Please join me in the opening words. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. If you brought a photograph to help with today's ritual, please feel free to bring it forward now during our opening hymn. Please rise and embody your spirit number 347 in the gray hardcover hymnal. gather the Spirit. Many of you here today have experienced a loss, or maybe are dealing with grief. Whether that be from a pet, the loss of a pet, or a teacher, grandparent, parent, spouse, sibling, kid, grandkid, coworker, dear friend. This loss might have happened quite some time ago, or it might have even happened just this week. The way that grief works through each of us is unique to us. But the thing that binds us together is that we all experience loss. The stages of that grief don't necessarily come in sequential order, but the thing that binds us together is that shared experience of loss and grief. We often tell a story here of Kisa Gotami and the mustard seed. Some of you know it. The Buddha told her if she could find a household that hadn't seen loss and got a mustard seed from them, he could bring her son back to life. She didn't find that house, but in the process of asking, she talked to a lot of people. She heard a lot of stories, and she didn't feel so alone in her loss. For just a moment, I invite you to name out loud your beloved departed. Just recently, I chatted with a small group of you, and the topic was planning your own memorial. A life-affirming conversation about how we deal with death and mortality. We talked about the 6 needs that anyone in mourning has. First, acknowledge the reality of the death and loss. Second, move toward the pain of the loss. Third, remember the person who died. Fourth, develop a new self-identity. 5, search for meaning. And 6th, receive ongoing support from others. Before I call you forward to light these candles, I invite you to look around this room and notice who else has experienced loss or grief. Look around and know who might need support or who might support you soon if you have a loss that is dear to you. For a time, we'll come forward in silence to light these candles. I invite children and youth forward first, along with their adults, or anyone that might want to light their candles when there are fewer candles lit. We can use these helper candles here to get a flame, light a candle, and then pass it to the next person, or put it back into an empty votive after you blow it out. This morning, we remember our loved ones and we honor them. May this moment be a moment of internal processing and external connection. Let's come forward and light our candles. In the rising of the sun and if it's going down, we will remember them. We're going to release our children and youth to their classes now, where they're going to continue this concept a little further and figure out a way to memorialize those they've loved. Will you join me in singing them out to their classroom with Go Lifted Up, number 1057 in the Teal hymnal? This morning, at the tail end of this ritual, it will be good to give voice and embodiment to some of this grief that we are holding. Take a few breaths with me. I think we often imagine that the space where we hold our grief is in our hearts and our minds, and we forget that it lives in our bodies too. Grief lives in our individual bodies and in our collective body, our communities. We utter our laments to give voice to what we hold in our hearts and minds and bodies, but sometimes we need to take a breath and notice all the places our grief resides and allow our bodies to help us give voice to what we hold. We might cry or sing or run or wail or stomp or hug our loved ones really tight. Today, we make space for the grief that lives in our bones, in our individual bodies, and in our collective body. And we're going to do this by making a rainstorm. So take a breath and follow us as we give voice to the grief that lives within us and among us. Sometimes a quiet, somber rain, the pitter-patter. Pay attention to your body as we move through this storm together. Sometimes the rain picks up. And sometimes it becomes a loud and raucous storm. Sometimes we're in the eye of the storm. Sometimes there's an eerie calm after the storm. This morning we are holding the joys and sorrows of our congregation, and we're holding them tightly and tenderly. We celebrate with Jordan Freitag and Kendra Tilbury at the birth of their son, Jonathan Kitt, 2 weeks ago today. They call him Kit. Celebrations of prayers of joy. Sharon Borg fell and fractured her arm this week. No surgery seems to be required, and we send prayers of healing and recovery. Prayers of strength and healing for Sue Dahlman as she recovers from her knee surgery. Prayers for Naomi Bear as she continues intensive chemo treatments for her leukemia. Prayers for Alan and Lori Gashot and their adult daughter, Sophie. Sophie received a cancer diagnosis 3 weeks ago, and they're still reeling with the news. Hopeful prayers of support and comfort as she begins treatment. We have a request here for my mother and family. Gratitude for my wife who forgives me so easily. And a thank you from Katie Heathcote to the pastoral care team for the cards, the parent group, and my friends for support, and Jack and Jessica for checking in on us during a very difficult time this summer. We are doing much better. And you all might be holding prayer requests in your heart, in your mind, in your body, and we name them out loud into this space now. Knowing that our griefs and our joys, our hopes and our worries are woven together across the generations, between our families and households. Let us find the balance in that fabric today. May it be so, and make it so. Amen. Please remain seated for meditation on breathing. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I'll breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out.
My name is Alex Rack, he, they. I'd like to take a moment to thank someone very special to this community. Laura Stone-Duraj has been playing piano over the past year in services, for special music, afterwards and in between. And I want to extend a special thank you for her services over the past year and looking forward to many more years of music making to come. So thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been really an honor and a privilege to play this beautiful instrument in this beautiful space in the presence of all of you. My very first job was playing the piano at a dance studio when I was 12. And so I put aside music for many years, and so it's been a great pleasure to resurrect my piano skills and to use them here. And it's been an absolute blast to collaborate with all the many fine, talented, and skilled musicians in this church, and especially the choir and the choir directors. This feels like the right time to pass on the opportunity and the responsibility. So I'm really grateful for Kathleen for stepping up. And doesn't the choir sound great today? Yeah. Yeah, I'm really excited about our new music team, Rack and Kathleen. Thank you for all the positive feedback I've received from many of you over the past couple of years. And I didn't properly thank the choir for sharing all your love last spring with me when Jody and Becky were exiting. Again, thank you all very much.
Before we take this morning's offerings, we have a few brief announcements. A deep and heartfelt thanks to all who made last night's Bazillion concert a rousing success. We had quite a few visitors and young families enjoying themselves and the company. Please visit the Breeze table in the social hall after the service, where you can learn more about our church's database and how to use the online directory. If you don't have a photo in the directory yet, will you please have your photo taken today? Ken Stewart will be next to the fabric wall after both services to snap a quick photo. We have a goal to add 50 more photos. Visit the table to learn more. We're also hosting a meet and greet for our current artists. Stop by the table to say hello and thank them for their art. This Wednesday, please join Reverend Jack for a conversation on grief and mortality during the season of All Hallows Eve. Many of us are wrestling with grief and loss, and we don't have to go it alone. This conversation is a precursor to our grief support group, which will be starting up soon. Please mark your calendars for our Jingle and Mingle auctioning, which is happening on Saturday, December 7th. Early donations will be collected starting this Friday, November 1st. And now we have an announcement for the chair on Music on Maple concert series.
Good morning, I'm Cynthia Tomlinson, and as was announced, I'm the chair of the Music on Maple Concert Series Committee. And we opened up our series for this year last night with a great family Halloween dance party with the Bazillions, and it was a big success. It was lots of fun, and a lot of people joined us. Thanks for bringing your kids and your grandkids and the neighbor kids and just coming without kids. It was really great. And I'd also like to thank the men's group for sponsoring the party so that it could be free for all. And next on our docket is on November 9th, 13 days from today in this space, we'll be hosting Nachito Herrera. He is a Steinway artist and a 2-time Grammy Award winner. And if you are not unfamiliar with him, we'll be playing some of his music out at the table outside the doors after the service. So please join us. It's going to be a great show. You won't want to miss it.
Each week, we practice generosity in the form of giving to our offering plate. You can give via the offertory baskets on our website, or use the text to give number printed in the order of service or in the chat box. However you choose to give, thank you for your generosity and faith in this life we live together. The offering will now be gratefully collected.
An excerpt from Autumn Plowing by Lucian Price. Let the air throb with the voices of deep-throated bells. Warm the hearth and set up the table with the cakes for your beloved dead, for this is the eve of all souls, when the spirits of those we have loved and lost revisit us, who keep vigil with unforgetting hearts. Sunset flames and smolders. Dusk brushes the evening air with wings of shadow. Let us come into God's acre and kneel there with heads uncovered by the graves where we have laid the beloved bodies, which no longer house the beloved souls.
Our second reading is The Summer Day by Mary Oliver. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes? Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
We are gathered in the memory of those who have fallen, who encouraged us to be who we are. We gather in the memory of those who helped create this congregation, where we can come and have courage to be who we are. In 1955, Unity Church in St. Paul became so large that they explored options, and the best decision was to divide the church and form neighborhood groups. According to the history compiled by Florence Jacques, a small group was formed in the White Bear Lake area with the goal of creating a branch offshoot of Unity. Some of those first members of this group were Mr. and Mrs. Kenneth Carlson, Mr. and Mrs. Edward Palmer, Mr. and Mrs. Clarence Deutsch, Mr. and Mrs. Joseph Fitzpatrick, Mr. and Mrs. Elliot Franklin, Mr. and Mrs. Lynn Hanson, Mr. and Mrs. William Soule, Mr. and Mrs. Eric Turner, Miss Helen Phil Brown, and Miss Donna Craycraft. Now, while the names of most of the women in this group have been omitted due to the patriarchy, I know y'all were thinking it, right? It's still so important to name these founders, these people who planted the seeds of this community. And I had a conversation between services with a member of the archives team saying, we need to find out their names, tell our history more truthfully. In the first few months of 1956, this group continued meeting. Committees were formed on housing, religious education, programming, publicity, and membership. And over the next few months, they planned how to proceed. They decided to hold weekly services in May as practice sessions for that fall. They took the summer off and met at a midsummer picnic at which people were asked to bring equipment for the future Sunday school. Scissors, colored paper, crayons, they were all brought. According to Florence, the response was very generous. It's not that hard to imagine. And so we have seen that happen over and over again here. Groups coming together and saying, we have what we need together to make this place happen. We have a dream, and we will help make that happen. These early services were held in the basement of Wildwood School, which required that all the materials be locked up during the week. So hymnals, coffee equipment, Sunday school supplies, vases, Kleenex. It was all locked away in a cabinet, which was nicknamed the Barn and Altar. And it was wheeled out and unpacked and set up and then wheeled back every Sunday by dedicated volunteers. Florence describes the organ, which was on loan from the Carlsons. So this organ was very old, incredibly difficult to get into the church, and difficult to manage it after it was in place there. It was pumped with the feet. The bellows were so old and dried out, and the pedals had to be pumped with more and more energy the further the service went on. The organist frequently finished the hymn out of breath. She often had to make impromptu repairs during the meditations. Once, when the organ was particularly unruly, she was forced to play a long and significant Amen after only one verse of the hymn, to the confusion of the congregation. Their charter service was held on November 18th, 1956, in which an official membership book was presented and signed. And with this, the congregation became the White Bear branch of Unity Church. This marked the official establishment of a Unitarian congregation in the White Bear Lake area. By December of 1957, with an annual church budget of $1,400, not counting staff help, the membership book had a total of 52 names, and the congregation continued to grow. Those early years were very frugal. There was a children's play before Christmas titled, How the Christ Child Got His Birthday. And according to Florence, their budget was so small that there were 3 angels, but there were only 2 robes and 1 pair of wings. And so quick costume changes were necessary. Through the years that followed, the congregation changed from a branch to a fellowship, becoming legally the North Suburban Unitarian Church, and obtaining a building became a priority. In March of 1959, the Mahtomedi Methodist Church was purchased with a generous donation from Unity Church of $1,100. That original building on Mahtomedi Avenue was purchased for $12,500, and September 13th was the dedication service. For that service, the Minneapolis Society offered 75 folding chairs and 200 hymnals for $15. And Helen Phil Brown made a gift of china and silver from her surplus. Though not surprisingly for anyone who has served on a board ever, at the next board meeting there was an argument for several hours about the name. And White Bear Unitarian Church was eventually decided upon. And given that finances were very tight with this new mortgage, people had to get creative. Members cleaned the church, they brought in flowers for Sundays, they made and served coffee. Does any of this sound familiar? According to Florence, sometimes with an inexperienced handler of the coffee urn, the coffee tasted rather peculiar. There's also the story of there being ice on the church steps and someone running out there with a salt shaker. So out of this dedicated group of souls, the congregation that we are all a part of was born. And we are here today because of these ancestors, because of what these ancestors did to give this congregation a solid foundation, to eventually hire a full-time minister, to hire the staff needed for its growing size. Eventually, members of this congregation decided to buy another Methodist church, this one, to parade over one Sunday, to take a leap of faith together. How many people here were in that parade? I knew there would be. Yep, there was some at the first service as well. And they gathered in the sanctuary, which is now our social hall, but that's where the original sanctuary was. And they dreamt about the community that they wanted to continue to bring into being. And what's true is that we are still here because of volunteers who stained some of the wood in this room during the building of this sanctuary, wood used from trees that were cut down on this property. We're here because of people who come to this place and find home and bring meaning making to this community. What's true is we are here because of these ancestors we have named, because of these ancestors before us, and because of the people next to you in the pews right now who keep us moving forward. Don't worry, I'm not going to make you talk to them yet. Because of volunteers who help this community to do the work of church together. Volunteers like the Financial Oversight Committee, who does work that is unseen, but ensures that we have systems to track how and when our money is spent. Because of our board, who set a vision for this congregation. Because of groups like the Land Stewardship Committee, who care for our grounds. You heard about the Music Committee, who are bringing community events back to us. Because of things like the auction and the co-chairs who help that to happen. Because of people who see a need and say, I'm going to help make that happen. Because of volunteers who are walking in the morning and see ice on the walkway and proceed to salt it. We don't have salt shakers at the door, but we do have a big bin of ice. Ice of salt, excuse me. For the volunteers who bake the cookies, is that not sacred? Do we love our cookies? We do. And we're always looking for more. And volunteers who bake cookies, that is. Because of our holy sacred saints, the coffee makers. And because of our other holy sacred saints, the volunteers who teach our children and youth about what Unitarian Universalism is and how we do church together. Because of your holy yeses. As we heard from Rachel Maxwell a couple of weeks ago, this church is very generous. This church is generous in its volunteers. This church is generous in how it cares for staff, and it's generous in terms of its financial gifts. In 1994, the congregation was gearing up for a capital campaign for a new religious education wing. They had bought this Methodist church here a few years prior. Kate Christopher and Diane Carlson were prepping to run the 94-95 annual campaign, and they realized it's time to create an endowment. They met with Mike Schwab to plan out how to do an endowment fund at beloved Camp Unistar. They wanted to create a financial foundation so that the congregation would not only be on more secure footing, but continue to have opportunities for people to practice generosity. In January of 1999, the board established a permanent endowment fund with an initial gift of $10,000 made by Bob Thornberry in memory of his mother. So this fund that we are celebrating today began with an idea and a gift in memory of an ancestor. In the year that followed after it was created, the endowment committee, made up of Mary Hauser, Deb Milkey, Peter Nord, Bob Thornberry, and Bob Hansen, had informational meetings for members and friends of the congregation to explain the purpose of the endowment fund and encourage members to name the church as a beneficiary in their wills. As of March 2001, there was $26,000 in the fund. And it became an annual tradition to invite people to join the Legacy Society to put the church in their wills. And there are members here this morning who are part of the Legacy Society. So if you are part of the Legacy Society, would you raise your hand? And if someone next to you is raising their hand, can you turn to them and say thank you? Thank you for naming this community in your final plans. And so over these last 25 years, we have worked on growing the endowment. We've worked on paying off our mortgages. And this has been done by generous members of this congregation, some who are here and some who are of living memory. Now I invite Steve from our endowment committee forward to share an invitation.
So I'd also like to mention the names of the current endowment committee members. And if you're here, there's a couple of you still here. Ron Metter, Dana Boyle, Jack Versteeg, Kathy McCumber. And I see a couple of former members, but I won't mention your names. Years ago, decades actually, our church ancestors established an endowment fund with the stipulation that money could be put in, but not taken out until it reached the amount of the annual budget. Basically, they locked it, preventing any of the money to be spent until soon. They imagined a future when the fund would be able to provide a stable source of income to help further the congregation's goals every year in perpetuity without ever running out. In today's language, to grow our souls and serve the world. The amount of each year's distribution would vary, but by limiting the annual distribution to a certain percentage, around 4 or 5%, it will provide between $45,000 and $50,000 annually to the budget without ever being depleted. So you might ask two questions. How did we get here? And how can $45,000 be distributed annually without the fund ever being depleted? The answer to the first question is history. The second question is math. The history answer is through cash gifts and members' estate planning over the years. Individuals and families who could give a gift in addition to the annual pledge did so, and others included our church in their estate planning. Much of the money that is in the fund now came from wills or estates. People earmarked a dollar amount or a percentage of a fund or an account. These funds were invested cautiously, and it now has $800,000 in it. And you are applauding each other and our church ancestors. Our annual budget is roughly $1 million, so when the fund reaches that amount, $800,000 to $1 million, distributions can begin. The math answer is that $1 million can be invested carefully without undue risk and over time yield an average of 4 or 5% a year. In this way, the annual distributions can be made and the fund is not depleted. So each year when the board is putting together its budget for the next year, it would have an additional $45,000 or $50,000. Thanks to a generous anonymous donor, a longtime member, we have an opportunity to unlock this fund. Beginning today and lasting through February, this matching grant program will match any cash contribution to the fund with a dollar-for-dollar match up to a total of $200,000. So this could mean an increase of up to $400,000 in the fund. In addition, the donor will contribute an additional $50,000 if 25 or more households submit a letter of intent for a future contribution of any amount. Very exciting. Like when a teenager first gets their driver's license, it's a developmental milestone for a church to reach the point where they have an endowment that is of a certain size so that it can begin withdrawals. Thank you to all who are here and who we are thinking of today. We'll be in the table. We'll be at the table in the social hall if you have any questions. Thank you.
As we gather today with all of these ancestors before us, with these ancestors we've heard about today who planted seeds of who this congregation would become, we have an opportunity to give for those who are here and those in our future who will be here long after we are gone. We have an opportunity to, like those original founders, give generously to ensure that this place that changes lives, is here for many years to come. How many of you were raised a Unitarian Universalist? How many of you wish you had been raised Unitarian Universalist? Right? Yes, same. I wasn't, and I wish I was, and my life would have been so different if I would have. Maybe you have reflected on this as well, how you learned to be in the world and how this faith, this denomination, these people help us to open our hearts to each other, to work to dismantle the systems of oppression that are in the air we breathe, to practice being in relationship together, and to listen for that still, small voice that calls us to care for each other, to care for our planet, to sprinkle a salt shaker on the sidewalks. Giving to this campaign is an act of hope. It is an act of generosity, and your $1 is just as sacred as your 10,000. And you might be wondering, well, what are they going to do with this money? And that is up to the board, but we are living on a budget that is built on reserves right now. And we're seeking to have a budget that lives within its means, that does not rely on reserves, that allows us to pay our staff fairly, to fund programs, to buy beautiful music scores for the choir and ensembles, to do church within our means. We continue to figure out a way forward with the gifts, challenges, and opportunities of our ancestors whose generosity of volunteer hours and financial gifts have made this place who it is. At the question box service this past summer, there were multiple questions about where we find hope. And with the election a couple of weeks away, I find hope in opportunities like this. Learning about our history, about these scrappy souls that came together and formed something out of a dream, who said, we can make this happen over and over again, and so we can make this happen right now. We're inviting you to join us, to put your names in, to be part of the Legacy Circle, to be part of this campaign, to join this church if you aren't a member yet. Join this hardy band of souls who grew out of this group back in 1955, who brought all the supplies for Sunday school together, who wheeled out church on a cart. Look at how far we have come. Help us to be part of the possibility for the future. As we look at all of these ancestors on this table before us, at these candles lit for beautiful, sacred, holy lives, we know our lives are fragile and brief. Mary Oliver says, "What will you do with your one wild and precious life? Here on this day, in this moment, you have an invitation to reflect on our ancestors who came before us and their invitations to you now. What will we do with our one wild and precious congregation? The future is ours to imagine. Come and join us." Our closing hymn today, "For All the Saints," was written for All Saints' Day. We sing it today for all of the saints among us, those who are in beloved memory, and those who are seated right next to us and watching online.
Rise and bow your spirit for all the saints. Hymn number 103 in your gray hymnal. We'll be singing the first 3 verses. For all the saints who from their labors rest, who thee by faith before the world confessed, thy name most holy be forever blessed. Alleluia, alleluia. Thou wast their rock, their shelter, and their light, their strength and solace in the well-fought fight. Thou in the darkness deep their one true light. Alleluia, alleluia. O blessed communion of the saints divine, we live in struggle, they in glory shine, yet all are one in thee forever thine. Alleluia, alleluia.
As we prepare for our closing words, a reminder to please take the photos of your beloved saints home with you. And Jack has a little bit of show and tell for us. That original membership book with all those beautiful names. Are we still signing that one? Or we are still signing that one. People can come forward if you want to look at it, and if you want to talk about membership, Jack's available. Also, we have our 12-minute tour, Gather by the Fabric Wall. And may you go forth this week in a spirit of gratitude for all of the people who shaped you into who you are, for the people who continue to shape you into who you are. May you take deep care of yourselves and each other as you move from this place, grounded in that love that connects us. Will you turn and tell your neighbor, thanks for coming to church this morning?